All right, welcome. This is your lab for the integumentary system. So we are in week 3. This is your PALS lab, kind of getting you ready for your PALS quiz on chapter 5, the integumentary system, that is due this week. So as you remember, how to get to these PALS labs, you're going to access your Pearson here in the module. You're going to open up My Mastering. You're going to open up the study area here on the left-hand side. Inside that study area will take you to the um, different chapters. So you're going to go here to PALS, Practice Anatomy Lab, and click here on Integumentary System. Once you click that, you will be in. There are two different um, modes of studying we're going to study on an anatomical model here, and then we will also study on some actual histology slides of different portions of the skin, both longitudinal and cross-sectional. But I wanted to start here with the anatomical model. We're kind of going to kind of go um, counterclockwise. And I will kind of zoom in here for a little bit as much as I can. Probably won't let me do that too much. And we'll begin here with the erector pili muscles. So these erector pili muscles that you see highlighted here, they are responsible for the contraction of the dermal root sheath that surrounds the hair follicle that cause your hair through a process called piloerection or pillow erection, causes the skin muscles here in the erector pili muscles to cause that hair shaft to uh, kind of stand on end. And this is a form of thermodynamics. It happens when we're cold or frightened outside, and it causes those tiny skin dimples that we also call goosebumps. You have sweat pores here. It's kind of hard to see, but they are these tiny pores here that are going to come out from your um, different types of sweat glands, sudoriferous glands we're going to talk about here. You have sebaceous glands, the term sebo meaning oil. You have, there's multiple reasons for sebum to be excreted here. It has a lot to do with the waterproofing of the skin. It has a lot to do with um, uh, kind of coating the keratinocytes in the epidermal layer. So your sebaceous glands are located here. Then we have the epidermis. Your epidermis is a multi-layered, multi-strata layer of the skin. It's the most superficial part, and it's composed of multiple strata. And we have a up-close version here, and later on in our histology slides, we'll see that as well. Although the epidermis contains several type of cells, they are mostly keratinocytes. And we're going to be looking at some of the different layers here of the epidermis as we go through. Below the epidermis, you have this, what's known as the papillary layer of the dermis, of the skin, and it plays a crucial role in providing the nutrients. Let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit. Yeah, there we go. There we go, of nutrients, regulating temperature, and the beginning of the facilitating of your sensory function through its highly vascularization and the presence of certain nerve endings, which we will also be studying. It has this nutrient supply layer. Okay, you see kind of the small, the blood vessels here going through it or to it. It's composed of loose connective tissue, which contains a network of small blood vessels. When you go and have your fingers stuck to get a blood glucometer reading, this is the area you're getting papillary dermal blood here through this papillary layer. This layer also is important for temperature regulation. It has an extensive network of vasculature, which we talked about, which helps regulate blood temperature. These blood vessels here in the papillary dermis can help dilate or constrict, either to release heat or conserve heat. And you have the beginning of some of your sensory receptors here, your Meissner corpuscles, which we will talk about here in a second, helping you to feel vibration like touch and enhancing your sense of touch. Certain these Meissner corpuscles here, which we'll talk about here in a minute, notice how they are here in this papillary dermal layer, and they help you with that light sense of touch. Also here in the papillary layer, this is the formation of your fingerprints, your dermal papillae, which are small nipple-like projections that give you your unique fingerprints. They are not only important for your individual identification, but they are also serve a physiological purpose for or anatomical purpose to increase friction, helping you be able to touch things and pick up things. And as you'll hear during lecture, this part of the skin is also responsible for containing macrophages that are important with your overall body's immune system and help protect against pathogens and crucial for your overall defense against infections and pathogens. It's kind of that first layer of defense. Moving on down, we now have the reticular layer of the skin. Okay, notice how this is much larger. The reticular layer provides the support, the elasticity, houses your essential skin accessory glands and organs, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And it is dense connective tissue. Okay, notice it's a pretty big layer. All these interesting things going on in here. It has collagen, it has elastin fibers, and that corresponds with some of its key functions. Okay, your reticular layer of your dermis here is number one, elasticity. The presence of these elastin fibers within it allows skin to stretch and return to its original shape. It provides mechanical support, the integrity of the skin, helps the skin to prevent from tearing easily, gives that structural support to like the soles of your feet and the back of your the palms of your hands and so forth. And it also houses a lot of these accessory structures. Notice how you have your hair follicles here. You have your sebaceous glands, you have your sweat glands, you have blood vessels, okay, coming through. You have certain nerve endings coming through. Here's a good side section here of some of the vasculature. So a lot going on here. You also have sensory receptors, some of the ones that that provide that deep pressure, those Pacinian lamellar corpuscles are also here in the reticular layer. And this layer also plays a crucial role as well in thermoregulation, okay, regulating body temperature through the blood vessels and sweat glands, which help to dissipate heat when needed. Your adipose tissue, we'll talk about adipose tissue and its function in a later chapter, but helps to provide shock absorption, body heat, protection, that kind of thing. Notice how that is located here in the integumentary system. The lamellar corpuscles we spoke about earlier, or your Pacinian corpuscles, notice how they are right here. And let me zoom in on one if I can. And these, see if I can, it's kind of hard to tell because it highlights it, but we'll see a better picture here later on. But the Pacinian corpuscles are found deep here within the dermis. And notice how it has kind of like an onion shape. It's hard to tell here, but there's layers and layers and layers of uh, tissue there that you can kind of see it here in this one that allow you to feel that deep, deeper transient pressure and high frequency vibrations. You have these Pacinian corpuscles or lamellar corpuscles in your tendons, inside joints, inside internal organs. So they have multiple onion-like concentric layers surrounding one central nerve ending that allow them to detect that deep vibration and high frequency vibrate, or excuse me, deep pressure is what I mean. Okay, when somebody pinches you, okay, that pinch, you're going to feel that as the skin is pinched. That's going to trigger this Pacinian corpuscle to feel that deep pressure and high frequency vibrations, about 250 to 350 hertz. Okay. You have your eccrine. Well, before we go to sweat glands, let's talk about the other nerve corpuscle here in this particular diagram, and it's your Meissner corpuscle here. We briefly spoke about it when we talked about the papillar layer, the papillary dermal layer, excuse me, here of your Meissner corpuscles, or your tactile corpuscles, are located here. Okay, so these are located in the upper dermis, which we talked about. They are um, elongated and they are encapsulated around nerve endings. They help you, they are what's called rapid mechanoreceptors and tactile receptors. So they help you to um, have that light sense of touch. Okay, like feeling the softness of a cat, or being able to read Braille, or your sense of being able to tell the difference between a very light sandpaper grit and a very thick or a thicker type of sandpaper grit. That is all thanks to the Meissner corpuscles here, your tactile corpuscles found in the papillary layer of the dermis. Now let's go back here to the sweat glands, and you have your eccrine sweat glands here. Okay, notice how they are your primary sweat glands. They are responsible for body temperature regulation. They produce a watery fluid that's about 99% water. The other percentage is wastes in the form of sodium, potassium chloride. It's slightly acidic, which gives, oh, excuse me, and lactic acid. And it is slightly acidic, which helps to deter bacterial growth here on the skin. They are coiled. As you can see, they are deep within the dermis. As you can see here, let me kind of get off it there. You can see a little bit of how they intertwine on each other. And they excrete, or not necessarily excrete, but extrude would be a better word, their fluid through ducts. Okay, so these secretory coils secrete through these ducts directly onto the skin. And there again, the primary function of these eccrine glands are thermoregulation. They secrete their product in response to heat and exercise, emotion, and this moisture provides evaporative cooling and helps to cool us down. Okay. You also have what's called, so you have two different types of sweat glands, or um, uh, sweat glands. Your eccrine, which we just spoke about, and your apocrine. So the difference between those, your eccrine or eccrine sweat glands secrete directly onto the skin through pores, where your apocrine glands secrete into a hair follicle. And your eccrine glands are more widespread, whereas your apocrine glands are not quite as many, but they are found in the groin and nipple and peri area. Your apocrine glands are associated with puberty, and submit or emit that pheromones in response to hormones and emotional stress, whereas your eccrine glands that we spoke about earlier are active throughout your entire life because they are more thermodynamic and heat regulation. We'll talk more about the hair bulb and the hair shaft and all of that here in a second, and the hair follicle. We're going to find a better picture related to that. Your subcutaneous layer of the dermis, also known as the hypodermis, you see here that's made up of your adipose tissue and more of your Pacinian corpuscles here. Your sensory nerve fibers, notice how they're kind of hard to see here. They are afferent fibers, which transmit this plethora of sensory information that the skin is gathering at all times: pressure, temperature, touch, um, pain. All of that sensory information is being sent to the brain via the afferent pathway here, thanks to these sensory nerve fibers. So they carry these signals to the central nervous system and allows the brain to process that. Okay. There's different types of fibers, some that are proprioceptors from the muscles, some that are touch receptors from the corpuscles we just spoke about, some through pain and temperature. But for right now, we're just focusing on where they are. All right, so let's get off this picture and get to our next one here. This is a kind of a sagittal view here of a lot of the same areas we just spoke about. So let's start here with your stratum corneum. So this is a more detailed, not quite detailed, but a little bit more detailed area of the skin. Your stratum corneum is the um, most superficial area of the strata or the epithelium, excuse me. And it is stratum corneum here, meaning dead, or horn-like, meaning tough. Okay, you see this thicker area of stratum corneum in what's known as thick skin, and they are clear. And this is the area that is the layers of skin that are constantly being sloughed off or shedded. You shed throughout the day and leave behind because they are sloughing off as a form of protection. This is another example of that eccrine sweat gland we spoke about that excretes directly onto the surface of the stratum corneum here, or the epidermis. Then you have your stratum basal layer, the deepest layer of the epidermis. Now, granted, see how we went from here, the stratum corneum, and you have all of these other layers, okay? Your stratum lucidium, your stratus granulosum, and even more. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about each one of those, but it's multi-layers. This stratum basal here, well, let's kind of go in order. So stratum corneum, yeah, the whole epidermis, which is made up of the stratum granulosum here. You have your uh, different layers. I think we talk a little bit about that in lecture, but this is the middle stratum that contains, there again, keratinocytes, and consists of 3 to 5 rows of epithelial layers. Here you see in this particular diagram, it has 3 different layers. This is a area where we spoke earlier about how fats or oils are released, and this is where the skin kind of becomes not waterproof, but water resistant, thanks to the lipid-based substances here that coat these keratinocytic cells in the stratum granulosum here. And as they push upwards into the stratum corneum, that is what gets sloughed off over time. So it's here within the stratum granulosum where you have your skin becoming somewhat water resistant. Okay. You have the stratum basal layer here, or basal, meaning bottom, basal layer. This is mostly or a single layer of stem cells that are actively going through um, 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 also known as your stratum germinosum, because they are, you have stem cell growth here producing new skin cells all the time. There's a lot of meiotic activity going on here, mitotic activity, and it's what pushes new it's what creates your new skin cells, that are going to eventually be pushed up through each one of these layers, the granulosum, the lucidium, the corneum layers of the skin, and eventually be sloughed off. Your skin is constantly growing, and that begins here in the stratum basal layer. You have your stratum spinosum, okay, which is, I know it's kind of confusing. Your spinosum is above the basal. Your stratum spinosum is named for the prickly cells, the type of spiny cells that are found here, and they are above the basal layer. And the function is similar to the basal layer, except there are just no stem cells here. We talked about the dermal papillae here. We talked about the Meissner corpuscles. We've talked about your eccrine glands. So you see just a different version here, or a different view. You see those sensory nerve fibers we spoke about. You see the hypodermis here, the reticular layer of the dermis we spoke about. So most of these we've already spoken about in that last slide. And then here is a kind of a deep dive into the hair, which is an which is an accessory to the integumentary system. So the part of the hair that you see, okay, the part of the hair that you see is known as the shaft, the portion that protrudes, that projects from the skin surface, and is the part that you cut, okay, and shampoo and all that. Below that, the hair actually originates here from the root. So this is the part of the hair that is embedded within the dermis. And actually, if you look real close, you see how the shaft and the root are keratinocyzed epithelial cells, and you have you have the hair root, which is, notice how, let's see if I can, I don't want it highlighted, but it's going to highlight it anyway. Notice this curve right here. Okay, how you have the hair follicle that is an infolding here of the epidermis. Okay, this curve right here, that is the hair follicle. Notice how it's going to infold upon itself and contain the hair root, the hair bulb, the papilla, and all of that part of the hair that we're looking at. Let me exit out just a little bit here. There we go. All right. So, looking further into the actual hair portion, you have the erector pili muscle we talked about earlier, how it's going to cause that piloerection, that hair to stand up on end, giving you goosebumps, the pitting of this part of the skin in response to temperature and thermoregulation or fear. You have the hair root, which we spoke about. And then moving on down, above the hair papilla, which is not labeled here, but we'll see it in one of our later slides talking about the matrix. You have the hair matrix here, which is rapidly growing keratinocytes that help to grow hair. The hair papilla here is the capillaries that provide the oxygen and nutrients to these dividing cells that are here in the matrix that aid in hair growth. And then you have this whole general area here, the hair bulb, which is kind of the enlargement here of the hair root and contains the matrix and the papilla. Let's now look at some actual histology slides. Okay, look at some actual skin examples instead of anatomical models. Okay, and we'll finish up here. Maybe go through a couple of quiz questions. If I point it out during lecture today, it will be on the quiz. So hint, hint with that. So here we're looking at thick skin. Thick skin is the skin that you're going to find on like the soles of your feet and the palms of your hands, or really any area of the body that has a lot of wear and tear to it. Okay. Specifically here, you're going to have the epidermal layer. It looks kind of thin here, but actually it's pretty thick with these microscopic layers. You have your dermis layer here. You see the blood vessels here within the dermis. And then you have your hypodermis or your subcutaneous tissues here. You see adipocytes here. Okay, you see one of those Pacinian corpuscles, that onion-like onion skin layered corpuscle that helps us to feel deep pressure. And then you see your eccrine sweat gland here. There's also a tiny blood vessel here as well. Okay, moving on. This is a blood vessel here, another cross-sectional view of the skin. Okay, an example here of more ducts. You can look at these on your own. I'm going to kind of just go through and hit the highlights here. You see another, well, before I tell you, look, can you notice the Pacinian corpuscle here? And can you notice blood vessels? Okay. So if you looked right here, that kind of onion shaped looking layered, you were correct with the corpuscle. And if you said here for your blood vessels, you are correct as well. Okay. This is a much better example here of the different layers of the epidermis we talked about. Okay. You have your stratum corneum layer here. And there's, notice when I kind of go out, you see multiple layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to a dozen different layers here of stratified corneum. You see the stratum lucidium here. And here is a good example of a Meissner corpuscle. Notice how it doesn't look like an onion. It looks kind of like pancakes in a way. And also its location will tell you its function as well. Okay, it's here in the papillary layer, and that's going to allow you to feel that, or it's above right here, your papillary layer of the dermis, or it's in, excuse me, that papillary layer of the dermis, and it's going to allow you to feel that light vibration. Here's another thick skin example. Okay. Here's a good example of one of your eccrine ducts. This is a very another good example of the your epidermis, your stratified squamous epithelium here. And if we were going to break it down into the different layers, but notice how you have all of these multiple stratified squamal, meaning flat fish-like scale cells here. I could look at histology slides all day. They're kind of beautiful in a way, aren't they? This is a sweat gland. Okay, this is and notice when I forget what chapter it was. Was it chapter 2 or 3, where we spoke about the different shapes of cells? So these are cuboidal cells that are going to usually excrete or secrete something. And in this case, they are sweat glands. So this is the inner duct of one of your eccrine sweat glands. Here is a close-up example of that Meissner tactile corpuscle. Notice how I said a little bit like pancakes instead of onion skins here. And also you can kind of tell the layers here. So this is a tip of the papillal layer, or excuse me, not a tip, but a one of the curves or bunches of the papillar layer here and your stratum basal layer of the epidermis. So that kind of tells you a hint there. And this is one of my favorites. You can clearly tell that this is a Pacinian corpuscle, the layered onion-like looking skin or onion layers. But what I wanted to draw your attention to here was one of those nerve fibers. Okay. We'll talk more when we get to the nervous system, what myelinated and unmyelinated means. Don't worry about that right now. Just know that this is a nerve ending that's going to carry this multitude of information. So the vibration or the deep pressure comes in through each layer, each layer, each layer, each layer. Okay. And sends that signal here through the central nervous system to the brain. That is thanks to this nerve ending here within this uh, Pacinian corpuscle. This is a longitudinal cut of the skin, specifically thick skin. So you see a sebaceous gland here. Okay, remember SIBO means oil, and you can kind of know that that is an oil gland and not a sudoriferous gland because where it's located, you see that this is a hair shaft here. Okay, not its own duct. You see also here hair follicles. Okay, you see your eccrine sweat gland here. We do not see the duct, but we can kind of tell because of its coiled nature. And then you see an erector pili muscle here, directly attached to this hair shaft right here. Real quickly, for the sake of time, because the video is getting kind of long, another sebaceous gland, another erector pili muscle here. This is what I meant earlier when I talked about the difference between the hair bulb and the hair matrix. So this whole thing here is your hair shaft, okay, and the hair root. This is the matrix, that top portion of rapidly growing cells here and fed by the papilla here. That is your vasculature layer. Okay. Another very good example here, hair root, follicle wall, matrix, and papilla. So make sure you understand the difference there and the functions there. Another very good example here of this is a cross section of the hair. Okay, so this is kind of if you cut the hair follicle in half and you have a superior and inferior version a view here. So this is your hair shaft. This is the internal sheath here. This is the external sheath and your root. Okay. Pretty pictures. And you can clearly see here that this is also a hair follicle, but this is a very good example of those sebaceous glands that extrude the oil directly into the lumen. The term lumen simply means tube. So into the lumen of the hair follicle that will extrude out into the skin. Okay. This is a very good example again of a sebaceous gland, an oil gland located within the hair shaft, and another very good example here of an erector pili muscle. Okay. And then lastly, another very good or a very good, excuse me, example. This is one of those dermal papilla that are in the epidermis here, or excuse me, that papillary dermal layer of the skin. Okay, dermal papilla. Another good example of the basal membrane, the different stratum corneum layers here and all the layers in between. Basement membrane that attaches that epidermis to the dermis. So I hope this has been helpful. I know it's been kind of long, but too bad, about 35 minutes, not too bad. So this will help you with completing your quiz. If you wanted to do a couple together, or as always, remember, please practice the lab practicum here. Okay, it's where you can kind of practice on your own, going through each one and typing in the different answers here, and it'll tell you if you're right or wrong. Okay, so do that several times. There's no limit on how many you can do, because these are going to be the same, very similar pictures you'll have on your quiz. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. Email me through Canvas.